Hi guys, and welcome back to Joe's Camera. This program is an hour-long program that we've made from a DVD that was produced around 2006, and it's all about catching yellowfish in Southern Africa. Remember, if you like this video, to press the like button, make comments if you want to comment, and make sure that you share it. And before we carry on, please make sure that you've subscribed as well. Exactly like the catfish, I was quite interesting about the yellowfish in South Africa in the early 2000s, and I met up with Pierre de Villiers, which basically in charge of yellowfish work groups in the country, and we discussed maybe researching the yellowfish, seeing that there was nothing done from a research point of view on any of our yellowfish species. The smallmouth yellowfish is probably our most prolific indigenous fish to be caught on fly. We got the University of Rand Afrikaans University, I think, was the guys that did the research. Linda Nell was the scientist that actually did the tracking. We got the telemetry, we tagged the yellowfish, and then we monitored and for the first time realized what the movement of the smallmouth and the largemouth yellowfish was. Then it wasn't as sophisticated as it is today, but nevertheless there were a few fishermen that were really dedicated to catch indigenous fish instead of invasive species, so-called. So let me not talk too much. I hope you guys enjoy it.
We travelled to the Gharip Dam, South Africa's largest, on the border of the Cape and Free State provinces. The dam generates hydroelectric power, and the waters below the wall would thus be attempted as a tidal system. We had to therefore wait for the water to start dropping before we could fish. The river below the dam wall have very largemouth yellows, up to 40 pounds, smallmouth yellows up to 20 pounds, catfish as large as 100 pounds, and labios or mudfish close to 15 pounds. After a long wait for the water level to drop, we paddled only about 50 meters to the center of the river. Pierre picked his spot first. I was a bit hesitant to enter the water with the lightning playing around us. The urge to hook into yellows made Pierre and Ivan lose their fear for nature's killer, I thought. Every year anglers lose their lives fishing, and the high level of graphite in today's rods make it even more dangerous, as graphite makes formidable conductors of electricity. Before we even hooked a fish, I witnessed the catfish patrolling the rocks where the river level had dropped, and trapped smaller fish in the rock pools. This fight of Ivan with the smallmouth yellowfish was shortened with approximately 10 minutes for the camera. He used the drift method, where it's advisable to use an indicator due to sensitive bites. This is a nice specimen, and Ivan used a 5-weight rod that would be on the light side when a larger specimen would be hooked in the stream. He also used 3 flies, and this method is known as the New Zealand style nymphing. We moved back to camp when the lightning moved closer, but returned the moment the system moved over. The sunset was magnificent, but we were not successful, and I think the lightning affected the fishing, something I have witnessed with some yellowfish species. After a superb leg of venison prepared by Ivan's wife that evening, we rose early and Pierre had to wait for the otter to search the shallows for trapped fish like the catfish did the day before. It is clear that the predators in this system have adapted to the drop of the water level, as even the local people were seen to capitalize on this. This happens due to the fact that the water level under the dam wall drops so fast that the fish are caught off guard and don't have time to move out of the rapids before the water level is too low. Unfortunately, the sluices were opened before Pierre had success. Of course, the fish learned that as soon as the water starts to rise, and that is long before we could, they moved into the bays out of the fast-flowing water. Smallmouth yellowfish are omnivores and prey on small insects and other living organisms and plant material. They also prey on small fish, and therefore at the right time you can have a lot of action with small fish imitating artificial lures. Besides clear water fishing for smallmouth yellows, most of South Africa's largest river systems have a stained to muddy colour in rainy seasons. The Orange is South Africa's largest river and is much muddier or stained than the Vaal River, our second largest river. Stained water is therefore much more common than clear water in South Africa. Where the Vaal and the Orange meet, one can clearly see the difference. The stained or muddy Orange River, however, has been coloured for centuries, as its first name given by Dutch explorers was because of the orange colour. Almost all of the Vaal and Orange River system is good yellowish waters. Stained water fishing is not nearly as popular as clear water, mainly because of inexperience, as anglers up until very recently believed that it is needless to cast a fly into waters where the fish cannot see the fly. In fact, the yellowfish thrive in these waters and clearly detect flies in off-colour water. Pierre decided to move upstream to the shoulder of the pool above, where we have been fishing up to now. It makes sense that it could be the best area to fish in this tidal system, as the water would be least temperamental. Before I could pack up and move closer, he had already hooked into 3 fish. 2 of them largemouth yellows. The largemouth yellows will be included in the Largemouth Yellow DVD to follow soon. If you target yellows in the orange, I would recommend a 9 feet 6-weight rod at least. A 5-weight struggles somewhat longer if the larger specimens of 4 kilos and more are hooked in the mainstream. With the rise of the water, we decided to move into a shallow bay out of the mainstream, and Pierre repeatedly tapped his fly on the surface on the same spot to attract catfish. A smallmouth got his fly first, however. Pierre and Ivan hooked into lots of yellows in the approximately 6 hours of fish only. As a matter of fact, Pierre called it the most productive fishing he had had in a long time, and I couldn't wait to put a rod in my hand, but it had to wait for some other time. Both the water temperature and the inflow of fresh rainwater stimulate the smallmouth yellowfish into spawning. Water temperature alone, without good rains, does not complete the stimulation, and therefore we witness the spawn late in February, as the streams have been filled for the first time due to the late rains. The yellowfish would then move upstream as far as possible within the temperature range of 20 degrees Celsius, similar to salmon, trout, eel and other migrating species. Only after 6 years do the yellows get sexually matured, when they are very close to around 30 centimeters. Pierre de Villiers and the other scientists interested and dedicated to yellowfish conservation found. At the time of spawn, the fish would gather in pools after migrating as high upstream as possible and be very vulnerable to predators such as otters, fish eagle, leguans and obviously humans. All along the streams, we found yellowfish that were eaten on due to abundance of food for the fish eagles and otters. They would simply grab a yellowfish and have a few bites and then see hundreds of fish centimeters from them with bodies half out of the water and kill another. We could detect a desperate or instinctive obsession to move upstream by both males and females. This is the pre-spawn period where the fish prepare to move into the streams to spawn. A unique behavior of the yellowfish species is that there is a preparatory stage where the fish slowly move around and touch each other in a trance-like state. This behavior can be detected after each spawning action, repeatedly until the males move out into the rapids and wait for the females to follow them for fertilizing the eggs. As soon as the females cannot contain the urge any longer, they move upstream to rapids where the males wait in stream. The males, up to 7 individuals, will rush towards the female and repeatedly bump into her. When the eggs are dropped, the males will squirt the spawn. This ensures that up to 7 male genes can be transferred to the new generation. Here you can see clearly how the males press against the females to spawn. The female will then move back or upstream again, where the cycle will repeat itself many times over the following weeks. The next females and males will be ready for spawning. The preparatory phase, where the fish swim and bump into each other in a pool, also ensures that only 10,000 eggs are laid, but will be larger in size compared to most competition species due to the energy and effort that went into the preparatory phase. The small fish that breed out would thus also be larger and also grow quicker. This will furthermore ensure that they can eat faster and larger food, and thus ensure that they are larger in the first weeks to ensure a greater survival during the most critical phase, the first season. The competition or other fish species would typically drop around 100,000 eggs and would have a greater mortality rate and would not be able to compete with the yellowfish of the same age in competition for the food. As soon as the eggs are ejected and exposed to water, they start to swell from 1 millimeter to around 3 millimeters and drop down to the rocky bottom, where they continue swelling and are able to stick between the pebbles, aided by a sticky residue. After about 4 to 5 days in 20 degrees Celsius water temperature, the eggs breed out. At 26 degrees Celsius, eggs would breed out within 72 hours. The small fish from the egg are still attached to the yolk bag and approximately 6 millimeters long and transparent. The egg sac is then used as a food source for the first week before it would start feeding. The small fish then rise to the surface and are washed downstream as far as the stream would force them. Obviously, some would be trapped in the shallow pools of rivers as the levels drop after the rainy season, and some would float to the lowest point of the water mass. Probably the greatest survival instinct for this species, to grow the largest quicker than its competition, and the lowest totals causes the greatest problem in shallow, narrow streams such as this. Poachers can destroy total populations before they actually have spawned, by netting the narrow points of the streams. This calls for great conservation strategies in areas such as these, as during our visit we located nets next to the river on exactly the same spot that Pierre and his staff arrested poachers the year before. Note how the fish move downstream after the spawning to get back to the main body of water. To think that the smallmouth can attain sizes of 20 pounds and more alone should be motivation for anyone concerned to seriously participate in the conservation of these truly African river fish. When the level of the streams start to drop and spawning cease, the yellows start moving back to the lower masses of water that would secure them through the winter. In stained or muddier water, that in any case are far more common in southern Africa, the yellow fish would not have the same magnitude of threat, although as soon as the rapids or shallows where the fish normally spawn are known by man, great damage is done. If you possess ground next to the yellowfish habitat, we urge you to take responsibility over your stretch of the river and monitor the spawn period especially.
Okay, the smallmouth yellowfish and largemouth yellowfish are endemic to the Orange Vaal River system. We're now in the headwaters of the Vaal. You get clear water sight fishing for the species, as well as fishing in muddy waters. One has to really come in very quietly from behind cover. Keep your eye on the fish and also on the ground for big holes. Be very careful. I've got a size 5 rod. Can go a bit lighter. Use a floating line. Okay, they're all in the pool in front of me. What I'm going to try and do is get behind some cover here, go down, and then just flick this line over them and allow the water or the fly, oops, first hook to the, caught the fisherman, Small little flick like that, and you're on. Classic fishing. Classic fishing, ladies. Look at this. This is excitement of note. Oh, and he's pulling. This is a classic fish. Classic fish. Classic fish. I'll stay down. I don't want to spook the rest. Bringing him in slowly. Oh, what a classic fish. Beautiful golden yellowfish. Clear water. Beautiful scenery. This is paradise. This is really paradise. These fish are moving into spawn in these areas, so we must not place a lot of angling pressure on them. Closed areas are used to protect the spawning fish. I'm going to bring him into the shallows here. Oh, one has to be careful about all the bush. I'm going to bring him into shallows away from the other spawning fish. This is a beautiful, probably a male if I have to look at him. He's a big fish, but it's thin. Handle these fish with great care. Wet your hands. Oh, it's a beauty. What a beauty. What a beauty. What a beauty. Smallmouth yellowfish. Note, it's actually a female that's spent. She's laid her eggs.
When Pierre caught his smallmouth yellow with his first cast, we thought it would be too easy to catch the fish at this late stage of the spawning cycle and decided to leave the active pools the fish were spawning in. After deliberation, we thought it would be better to return later in the afternoon for two reasons. One, for me to also catch at least one fish, and two, for us to monitor the movement of the fish we caught and identified to be able to measure the impact on the spawn our fishing activities had. The fish were spooked further upstream in this specific pool after my first cast. The pool seemed to contain fish that were busy resting after the actual spawn. During this stage, it seemed to be somewhat easier to get them to take a fly compared to the pre-spawn phase and just before the next spawning actions after they have had time to rest. They seem to go into some form of trance just before the actual spawn and are then not interested in the flies. It was a whole lot more difficult to hook my fish, and I had to cast my fly 10 centimeters further every cast to ensure that the fly never lands too close to them as they were already spooked. Every time the fly got close to the school, the hungriest and closest fish to me would turn around and strike at the fly. I did not let the fly stay too long in the water to ensure that the fish didn't get used to it and wanted to keep surprising them with every cast. Every time I cast too far, in other words, onto the fish, they rushed further up the pool and didn't take the fly for a while. Due to the nervousness of the school, the fish that decided to grab the fly always turned around to flee back to the school the moment he or she grabbed the fly. Sometimes the fish turned before the fly was properly swallowed, therefore the many misses you are witnessing. I had to frequently change the fly due to the fact that every time I missed a strike, I knew the fish would not go for the fly again. The great advantage for the fish in extremely clear water such as this is that they could see any line as clear as a centimeter thick cable, and any fly that is not perfectly presented will be ignored.
Hi there, my name is Andre Hofman. I'm from Wagabiki Eco Farm. This is the place where the research for the telemetry research for the smallmouth and largemouth yellowfish has been done. Wagabiki is situated in the Kudus Dry Conservancy. The conservancy has been established in 1996. Ever since it's been strongly run, and we're very strict on different terms of conservancy. In 2000 we started off the Yellowfish Conservancy Association. We were one of the founder members. We've been targeted and we've been practice catch and release since then. In 2001 we started off Wagabiki as a fly fishing destination. So then if you approach a new stretch of water, all I want to do is just to introduce you a few important facts and points that you must look at. This is just from my experience from fishing this water for the last few years. And then first thing you have to do is to look for a decent spot of water. You can't just go into a stretch of water and start fishing it if you don't know if there's going to be fish. First of all, what we're going to look at is this is a specific stretch of riffles that you're going to be looking at. There's some hyacinths around. Hyacinths can be a bad thing. Normally when they open the sluices and water level rises, also going to be a bit difficult to fish this type of water, but there's going to be lots of hyacinths around which might get tangled with your line. As you can look at the hyacinth here, it's a dead bank of hyacinth which will give you a type of a food bank. There's some riffles over there, and just behind the riffles, as you can see, there's some slower water, which means normally it's a bit deeper water, and you might find your bigger fish lying in there, not using that much energy to move around in the fast water. And then furthermore, you're going to look for water temperature. For this time of the year, when your water temperature is above 20, it means that your fish will still be in this type of rapids. When it gets into the colder months, which we're going to cover later, you'll find that your fish will move off into deeper, slower water. Water temperature, if the water temperature is right, and you'll find your fish in the shallow waters. Next thing to look at is food bases. There's lots of weed and things on the bank. There's an overhanging branch, which means there's lots of aquatic insects around. Therefore, using even dragons and that kind of thing can be positive in this type of water. Furthermore, there's going to be lots of other factors that might influence the water, like for instance, alkalinity, pH. It's a bit difficult to test it for everybody. Of course, the instruments are quite expensive, but it's going to influence the fishing. If the water is if the pH is too high or too low, you'll definitely find a decrease or increase in the fishing. Another thing is if they open the sluices. If the water is too high, first thing what's going to do, they're going to affect the water quality. As you can see, the water is quite clear, which means the visibility is pretty good and the fish can see the small insects, small imitations of insects that you're going to use. If they open the sluices, lots of times the water visibility goes down, and also the water is going to be too strong, and it's definitely going to have an influence in your fishing. Also, another important point is air pressure. If there's a low pressure moving in, it has affected the fishing. They moved down, they stopped feeding. Another thing is cold fronts moving in. If there's a cold front moving in, normally with a southern wind blowing, they also affect the activity of the fish, and it might decrease your catching. Just another very important point that I want to introduce to you is that this type of habitat, as I described for you, with these type of riffles, normally is very good habitat for the yellowfish to spawn in. We call this the spawning beds, as it's got gravel bottoms. And it's very important that if you're catching in this type of water and you see spawning fish, to avoid them. Don't even try casting at them, and the biggest thing is don't wade through those areas where the fish are actively spawning. What I want to show you guys now is just the basic needs that you're going to need as a fly fisher fishing the Vaal. First of all, you're going to need a decent rod, normally a 5-6 weight in the Vaal. As for the smaller weights are a bit too weak to pull in your yellows, and you waste too much energy on the fish and on yourself. You're going to need a fly line, which we're going to fit your rod and also your reel. Then another thing you're going to use is a wading stick, which is very important in the Vaal, especially in an area where you've never waded before. It'll just help you from breaking bones and bumping toes. You don't need to buy one. You can just cut one from a normal piece of wood, or you can even use a broomstick for that. Another thing is quick dry clothing. So you can see quick dry pants and quick dry shirt. And it's also important to use the long sleeves, as it also protects you from the sun. Wading boots are very important in the Vaal, as there's lots of rocks, and you don't want a bruised ankle when wading through the water. There are a lot of different vest packs on the market available. This is just one specific one that I like to use, and it's also important to keep things from hanging loose, as it might tangle with your fly line. Some of the basic needs that you're also going to use is decent Polaroid glasses. It protects your eyes, and it also makes it much more easier to spot the fish in the water. And then also a hat. Protect you from the sun and also from flies in your ears. Before we get to the fly box, just to know that there's lots of things that you can put in these bags, like nippers and tweezers and strike indicators, but we'll go straight to the fly box. When it comes to fly boxes, there's lots of boxes on the market, and I choose the watertight boxes as it keeps your flies from rusting. Before we get to the flies, it's just important to know that the flies in your box must represent the imitations of the insects out there. This is just some of the basics that you will find in this area. This is your caddis patterns, your rockworm patterns, in different colors and sizes for the different seasons that you'll have in the water. And also your mayfly patterns, also different colors, and some of them very minute and small. And then there's other types of patterns that will work, like for instance your dragons and your damsels, your freshwater shrimps, your bloodworms, and then also terrestrials, like for instance the cricket. This is just some of my favorite flies that I've been using in this water with much of success. Just some of the caddis patterns that I've been using, and these two are some of the mayfly imitations I've used. I found that in early summer the orange hotspot works very well. As for the emerging patterns in that time of the year, has got an orange glow to them. These purple little flashbacks work very well in later summer and also in autumn. As for purple, it's got a very prominent color in the water. Your green caddis, as well as your brown mustard caddis, works very well throughout the summer season. As for there's abundance of them under these rocks, and also in the adult form there's abundance of them even in dry flies in this time of the year. I've moved now into the water, and as you can see I choose this type of water because of the riffles and a bit of slack water behind these big rocks, where there's normally some deeper water and your bigger fish will hold there. With me I've got, as I said earlier, I've got a 5-weight fly fishing rod with a floating line and with about a 9-foot leader, and I also choose to use some strike indicator with that as well. You can use intermediate line, but I choose floating line. As for in this type of water, which is quite shallow, you have a line that's underwater and it won't tangle with the rocks. Intermediate you will use especially later in the season, in your winter seasons, and also in deeper, slower flowing pools. The specific rod I've got here is one of my favorite rods, and I prefer to use these as they were manufactured especially for the Vaal and for these specific type of regions, and also fishing fast flowing water. This is the Horizon XRS. It's a 5-weight, 9-foot, and it's a 3-piece. It's got a very strong backbone, which means you'll bring in your bigger fish and without tiring too much. It's a very fast casting action, therefore if you're casting at a specific area and you see a fish move a bit upstream, with one cast you can pick up your line and put it in where you want it. There's many types of casting, about 6 or 7 of these, but in the Vaal River in this area there's 2 ones that's specific for the Vaal. First one is your normal cast, and then you can do your roll cast for these where you have short distances, just doing short line nymphing, and also if you're a beginner and if the wind are blowing. It's very important to not do too much false cast, as you will spook the fish. Therefore 1 or 2 or 3 casts are more enough, as in the Vaal you don't need to cast 20, 30, 40 meters. As you can see, you'll have different layers of streams in the Vaal, different speeds. Therefore you're going to have drag on your line, and it might influence the way that your fly is drifting. Therefore, as you drop it in, you need to strip at the speed and then also mend a bit. Just a normal roll cast to get that loop that the water forms in your line, just to get it down upstream from your indicator. Now there's 2 types of mending. The one is an upstream mend, the other one's a downstream mend. Now it's important that if you're fishing this, you'll see that your line is going to form loops. Now the one that you're normally going to do is your upstream mend. Just flip your line upstream with a normal roll cast. And then you also have your downstream mend. That is for when there's rocks and you see that your line is going to tangle about it. just do a normal flip over downstream from where your indicator is lying. Always keep your line from not drifting downstream, not creating drag on your fly. No need to cast 20, 30, 40 meters. Just a 5-6 meter cast. Keep the drift off. Remember, any unnatural movement on your indicator, whether sideways or a slight pitch, or even going slower or faster, might indicate a fish on your fly. Therefore, as I put it always, when in doubt, strike. And you will have one on. Yes. Smallmouth. Always try and keep them upstream from you, as for when going downstream you'll sometimes need to walk behind them. Okay, try and fight as high as possible. Always try and pull them upstream from you. Not too much strain, otherwise you might just break your fly line. Just get them upstream from you, slowly. Pick the nose up. Make sure your hands are wet when you're handling them. And there you go. Another. Slowly resuscitate a bit. It's all about the fish. Okay, that was a decent smallmouth yellowfish. I took her on a green caddis. I use about the 9-foot leader. I prefer to use the strike indicator, especially orange color in this type of season. For this is quite deep water and slow flowing, therefore the takes are very delicate. It was on a floating line and the cast was about 5-6 meters from me.
Pierre, we are targeting Whitefish here, also known as Whitefish. It's our largest indigenous fish in the Breda River system. This is a good place to catch them. Good habitat here, nice deep areas next to the vegetation on the side of the river. Generally the whitefish like to be in those areas because of we've got kingfishers in the area, also there are otters, and so they've got shelter nearby. Because the water's so clear, one has to be careful with one's approach here and approach the fishing spot, the likely area, carefully. We've had a bit of a quiet start. No fish as yet, no signs of fish feeding. But that's to be expected with whitefish. They're very difficult fish to catch on a fly. There are times when it can be reasonably straightforward, but generally, especially in these clear waters, it's not an easy fish to catch, and really it's a good test for any fly fisher. The bottom of the river here is a combination of cobble rocks and sand, and we find that the whitefish feed pretty commonly on mayflower nymphs, burrowing mayflower nymphs, also mayflower nymphs under the rocks. To catch the whitefish, obviously then a logical fly to use is particularly a small fly here. The mayflower nymphs are of the order of size 14 to size 16, so we'll use a fly that size. For example, a gold-ribbed hare's ear, or a little more of a whitish color of the fly. Seems to be quite successful here. Because the water is so clear here, visibility, we're talking about 2 to 3 meters. And because it's reasonably shallow, a very effective way of catching these whitefish is to actually sight fish for them. Fortunately today there is very little ripple on the water, there's very little wind, so hopefully we'll see a school of whitefish, and then we've got a very good chance of catching one of them if our presentation is correct. Pierre's seen some whitefish just ahead of us, hugging the channel next to the riverbank vegetation, and fishing his mayfly. The important thing obviously is to fish your mayfly slowly and try and imitate the swimming action of the mayfly nymph under the water. Oh, lovely stuff. Saw the strike indicator move and struck, and he was there. Fantastic, or she was there. Fish isn't a big fish, but like all yellowfish, they fight wonderfully. Pound for pound, very little to beat them. Fish is getting tired now, so we can put a bit more pressure on it. Not a bad vitfish for this river. It's an acceptable fish, and obviously the first fish of a day is always a special fish. These yellowfish never know when the fight's over, so one's got to be very careful right to the end. Now this is a good whitefish for this river. Always a good idea to wet your hands before you touch these fish. Now that's actually a good whitefish for this river, very good fish. Typical bronzy green color of the whitefish. And what's important to note with the whitefish compared to the Clanwilliam yellowfish is the more pointed head. As I say, the bronzy green color, and the dorsal fin has got slight serrations on the second dorsal fin ray. And also the fins at the bottom tend to have these blackish tips. But that's an adult whitefish. They become adult when they're probably about 25 centimeters in size.
Okay, so this is a little small-scale yellowfish, one of this unique population. And you see what makes this community so incredible is that because it's confined, it doesn't have the ability, like most other yellowfish species in the country, to migrate. You see, what yellowfish do is yellowfish migrate in response to different environmental conditions. And what happens most of the time is that yellowfish move around in relation to the availability of either a food source or temperature. So, let me just grab this guy nicely. You see, now what's unique about these fish is that in 1969, when the work on yellowfish just begun, a professor from then the University of Venda came down to look at to do a survey on the fish. And what he discovered was that this population of small-scale yellowfish was the only small-scale yellowfish group that had this thickening of the lips, what they call this vericornus mouth formation. As you can see, this is actually quite a good example, because for the size of this yellowfish, he does have quite developed, thickening of the lips. And what it is it was initially thought that because Maraquensis, the large-scale yellowfish, doesn't occur here, and large-scale yellowfish readily have this thickening of the lips, because that population doesn't, or that species doesn't occur here, it is believed that this population has taken over that niche. In other words, it's taken over that role that large scale had. So we'll try and catch another one just now, just to show you the differences. But what we find now is that more and more small-scale populations all over the country have got this formation, and that it is not unique to this population, but because this population has been isolated on its own, it is unique, and it has actually taken over the role of many other species. It has gone into that ecological niche. There we go. That all the other species, say that large scale, that Maraquensis did occupy. So what we're doing is, we've got all sorts of little projects on the go. We're looking at what these guys eat, we're looking at what they look like, the variation in the populations, we're looking at where they breed, and what we're trying to do, which is most important, is we're trying to get people involved. We're trying to get people involved so that we not only can show that there is a unique population here, but that we can actually create value. Because if we create value and we give the local landowners, the people who own the riparian areas adjacent to this river, if we can show them that these fish are valuable and that they can actually make something out of it, then they'll look after it.
Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please make sure, if you liked it, to press that like button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Share if you haven't shared. And make some comments below. See you till next time.